hello again. Welcome to the Don McKeag Show. I'm sorry there's been a gap in between the last show. I don't like to have any of my other shows last too long, but it has been so long this summer and so busy that I've been unable to do every show that I'd like to have done. The thing that I do want to mention, however, to you is that those that are new to the show, if you like what you're hearing, I do a radio show every Saturday on Cape Cod called the Don McKeag Show, and it's on 95.1 FM, WXTK. It's on Cape Cod, and it's a call-in show. So you can call in. I love to hear from people. I've been on for a long time. I started in radio 25 years ago, just part-time. I was in the restaurant business, and I was asked by Ernie Bach Sr., who had just bought a radio station. So that's how I got started, and now I just do the one day. I was on every morning. But again, keep that in mind if you enjoy what we have to say here today. Excuse me. Now, I was a teacher and a coach in high school, and I enjoyed it very much. I always missed it, in fact. I loved the kids, high school. And so that I have always been an educator and always been close to sports. And we will get into the controversy that just has gone on last weekend, but that's not really what I want to focus on. And so what I want to do is talk about the things as a teacher I used to try to discuss and have my students discuss in class about the past and about respected historical figures and what they had to say. And at my stage in life, I would not be telling the truth if I did not say it's discouraging to me to see our country being torn apart with dissension and rabid criticisms. Disagreements are fine, but when they're rabid and nasty, when the press is doing what they're doing today, not only to the president, but to other people. I don't care who the president is. I don't care if you like him or not. It is called respect, and it is called decency, human decency. And people in high positions that are reporters or anything else, a congressman or whatever, are supposed to, as part of their a responsibility to their voters and to their listeners, they are supposed to have some kind of class. And I've seen this erode in my lifetime. I'm a post-World War II child, and this country was so together at that time, and I guess that's why I noticed the difference. Martin Luther, for whom Martin Luther King was named. Martin Luther was a very devoted German Catholic priest who just got so tired of the corruption at the top of the Catholic Church. The popes, the bishops, the cardinals were corrupt. He took it upon himself, therefore, to start a movement. As a teacher, I used to discuss Martin Luther in my classes. Now, Martin Luther, for whom Martin Luther King was named, his father, of course, was a minister, and Martin Luther King became a minister, but he admired Martin Luther, who in 1526, as a devoted Roman Catholic priest who took on the corruption of the Catholic Church, the popes, the bishops, the cardinals, there was tremendous corruption in the church in that 16th century. He took this on and, of course, ended up forming the Protestant Reformation. But what I want to mention about this and why I bring this up is because we have tremendous corruption in our government today for the same reason. There's too much power, too much money. So what I see is a need for taking on this corruption. But Martin Luther, it is not the Catholic religion. Let's get this straight. Just like this country, there is absolutely nothing wrong with the form of government. It's the best form of government ever on the face of the planet. It's the individuals that are running this country, both parties. So Martin Luther, I've mentioned this before and I want to keep repeating it, that hopefully you'll be able to tell your children, grandchildren, or just discuss it with your friends. Martin Luther once said, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when all of us, everywhere, and I'm paraphrasing, when one must take a position that is neither safe nor politic nor popular. We must take a position because our conscience tells us it is right. President John F. Kennedy, my first president that I could vote for, once said, a man does what he must in spite of personal consequences, in spite of obstacles and dangers and pressures. And that is the basis of all human morality. I'm a Christian. This country still calls itself 73% Christian, even though the church going, especially by the young, has plummeted. And it's plummeted again because we have a country now that is self-seeking, self-serving, greedy, and is ignoring that the Christian religion has what we call the 7 deadly sins. I used to talk about this, have my classes, now this is 40 years ago, have them tell me what they thought about the 7 deadly sins. There's all sorts of ways in which they are described, but I always use this as wrath, which is anger, greed, sloth, which is laziness, pride, lust, which is this over-intense sexual climate today, envy, that's jealousy, and then gluttony. And gluttony is getting fat on the land, not only physically fat, but financially. That's what we're fighting now. All these other things that become so media important really are about the 7 deadly sins. And one of the things that's so sad that I want to bring up, but I mean, these are warnings. John Swinton, in 1880, was the chief of staff and chief editorial writer for the New York Times. This is 1880. And they were having a banquet with all of the writers, the well-known columnists and all. Remember, the 1880. And it was to celebrate the press as being, unbiased and principled. Now he stands up, delivers this speech to the group, hundreds of them. Remember, the business of the journalist is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of mammon, and to sell his country and his race for his daily bread. You know it, and I know it. So what folly is this toasting an independent press tonight? We are the tools and vassals of rich men behind the scenes. They pull the strings and we dance. John Swinton, 1880. Remember this too. Mark Twain, one of the great humorists, great storytellers, he said this, and again, it's humorous, but it's pretty sad that it's so truthful. He said, those who do not read the newspaper, now this is in the 1880s, those who do not read the newspaper are uninformed. Those who do read the newspaper are misinformed. That lends credibility to this Mr. Swinton. And in 1887, Alexander Tyler, a Scottish history professor at the University of Edinburgh, had this to say about the fall of the Athenian Republic, which he was an expert at 2,000 years before. Quote, "A democracy is always temporary in nature. It simply cannot exist as a permanent form of government. A democracy will continue to exist up until the time that voters discover that they can vote themselves generous gifts from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates who promise the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that every democracy will finally collapse over loose fiscal policy." I call it irresponsible fiscal policy. And that's local, state, and federal. And it's always followed by a dictatorship. And we're talking about the greatest countries ever seen in this world. And we are capable, and we are on that track unless we start learning from history. But remember that old adage, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Now we go to the 26th President of the United States. I received this from a listener on the Cape, and I'm happy to say I hear from people all the time. I hear from people at the coffee shop in Carver that hear this and watch this show. I apologize again for not being more regular on the air, because I know that my voice is one of the rare voices out there on the side of conservatism, even though I was a Democrat most of my political life and friendly with the Kennedy family and lived down in Hyannisport. So people have a hard time being too critical of my opinions and the fact that I was not a Republican. I am totally independent now, and I am totally apolitical. I just wish I could see more people running, and they're not going to run because of the way candidates are treated. Also in my history, I ran for state rep as a Republican. I was asked to run on the Cape, and it was Dukes County, which encompassed Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, Falmouth, Hyannis, parts of Yarmouth. But it was very liberal and very Democrat, and of course I lost. But I gained a lot of knowledge about the political system, and I was also congratulated by those who have known how difficult it is. It's a very difficult job, and I applaud both parties, anyone that runs for office. It is a commitment, and also I applaud hugely the wonderful people who work for the candidates, asking nothing, standing around the rotaries and distributing mailings. I thank all of you, because that's another thing that when that goes, the political system is really gone, because that's where the roots are, the people who give of themselves. And remember, that's what President John Kennedy said, and the Democrats and today's people, unfortunately, said, "Ask not what your country can do for you. What can you do for your country?" The other old one that those that went to school when I did, I'm not too big on education today. I think they skip around things that aren't convenient for this trend that I call liberalism, and I make no bones about it. I am very dismayed at where it's taking our young people, the college level especially. But that old adage was, united we stand and divided we fall. And that will bring us ultimately to this very sad and unfortunate situation in the NFL, which is a huge entertainment and a huge time for people who are overworked, many cases underpaid. They can't even watch a football game today or a baseball game without these birds making it political. It has no business being there, in my opinion. But first, let's get back to President Teddy Roosevelt. And I hope you can just understand that these are all the trappings of what made this country great and the things that people have said warning us. Abraham Lincoln warned us. Abraham Lincoln said, America, the United States, will never be defeated by a foreign power. If we lose our liberties and our freedoms, it will be because we were the cause of the loss. Well, Teddy Roosevelt, who was the 26th president, came into office 1901, again by accident. He was the youngest president, 42 years of age, and the political machines in New York, they wanted him out of the way because he was too honest. He was too caring for the people. He wasn't in the tank like our politicians are today. Sorry, but they are. Massachusetts and the rest of the states, they're in the tank. They're hypocrites. They say one thing and then out of the corner of their mouth they do something else. And we can't get rid of them. I'll tell you the biggest protest I'm not a big protest supporter, but I'll tell you what I'd give to have a multi-million march on Washington and throw all of those people out. They give us a health care system that they don't have to live by themselves. And that's supposed to be the American way. Well, President Teddy Roosevelt was elected on his own, but he became president by accident. That was William McKinley. Getting back, he became vice president because those in the corrupt New York City wanted him away from local and state politics. He was the governor. And they wanted him out, so they got him into the vice presidential position, only to have the good Lord or something else happen, and William McKinley was assassinated, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, this 42-year-old man became president. And boy, did he get things done. And boy, did he upset so many people. Like, guess who? Only, of course, he didn't do it with quite as crazy a way that we have today, but it's very interesting. If you choose to look in and be honest and open, you'll find that this country for a long time now has needed a cleaning. It is a swamp in Washington. There's no question. The legal system is crooked. But anyway, here is what I like, and this came from, I started to tell you, I hear from people that catch this show, or they also send me things in the mail, and I appreciate it very much. But these are some of the quotes, hopefully now I can find them, by President Teddy Roosevelt, and how pertinent they are today to what's going on. And once again, I cannot understand why they're not right in front of me, since I'm the one that put them right in here. Hold on. Can we play the music there? Okay. Thank you, Bill, by the way, for sending me this. Now just hear this. Now this is 1902. 1902. That's 115 years ago. The things that will destroy America are prosperity at any price, peace at any price, safety first instead of duty first, and love of soft living and the get-rich-quick theory of life. think about all that's said in that and about what America's social stratus is now. A welfare state, a state, forget welfare. We have a state now of these multi-million-dollar lotteries where I owned, when I left teaching, I bought a general store in Marston's Mills called the Cash Market. I wish it had been cash. But I saw the people then, now this is quite a few years ago, but I saw them then. You were supposed to use your welfare money. We didn't have EBT cards, but it was supposed to be to support your family, to buy the children food, milk, not cigarettes, not alcohol, not candy. But it wasn't long before the liberals in Boston decided, no, that's not fair. So all of a sudden, the merchants could no longer not allow them to have these items that were not the intention of welfare. But what then came about were these lotteries. Now, when I was a kid, gambling was illegal. I worked in Four River Shipyard, and they used to have the numbers pool, and you could bet. I was 18 years old. And they'd come around, they'd get the numbers from the Herald American, and you'd give this gambler, but it was illegal. Now the state, seeing the huge amount of money that can be taken in, this is corruption. And this is, again, because they overspend in Boston, they overspend in the local communities, and they certainly overspend in the federal government. They need revenue. They need it from you. Now, they're already giving you the shaft by taxing everything from your telephone bill, every gallon of gas. It's laughable when they blame the oil companies for how much gas prices go. Take a look sometime at how much is tax. And they already collect, by the way, from the oil companies, the government does. But anyway, I see, and you'll see, if you go to 7-Eleven, you go to different places, you'll see the same people every single day who don't have any money of their own, haven't worked for years, and they're using their card or the money they've gotten, for whatever way, to play the lotteries day after day after day. Because it's addictive, just like drugs. That's Teddy Roosevelt 115 years ago. The things that will destroy America are prosperity at any price, peace at any price, safety first instead of duty first, and love of soft living and the get-rich-quick theory of life. Look at these. Knowing what's right doesn't mean much unless you do what's right. President Theodore Roosevelt. To announce that there must be no criticism of the president or that we are to stand by the president, right or wrong, is not only unpatriotic and servile, but is morally treasonable to the American public. Now here's the ultimate conservative. He's not ever saying, and you'll never hear me saying, criticizing Donald Trump or any president. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the American way. It's the way in which you criticize a man elected by the people of the United States of America. That's what makes it bad. Because now you send to young people a message that you can vilify the leader of your country. And then you've got nothing more than what these third world countries have in their evil leadership, and that is a Nazi type of mentality where the leader is able to now respond criminally. Here's another one. Nothing in the world is worth having or worth doing unless it means effort, pain, and difficulty. I wish I could tell more young people this. I have never in my life envied a human being who led an easy life. I have envied a great many people, however, who led difficult lives and led them well. Those people who are undermining church, undermining religion in general, and there's thousands of them. And that's a big part of this leftist movement. I'm sorry, but it is. They don't want you to read the Bible. They don't want you to learn things that have been said for over 2,000 years. Idle hands are the devil's workshop. All the horrible drug deaths now in our young people, they're all emanating from a supply of drugs. The supply in inner cities is there because people aren't working. They are selling drugs because they can make a lot of money. And why are the drugs in this country? Because people in high places are also making a lot of money off of the drugs. So, and the last one, a vote is like a rifle. Its usefulness depends upon the character of the user. Well, now looking back at my notes on the coming up to the situations that we are now looking at. For the last, ever since Sunday, and the NFL, which once again, we lack courage today in the ownerships. They don't want to say no. And of course, my theory is that these are generations who've been spoiled by their parents too often, and they've been allowed to make decisions, and the parents are meant to be just kind of yes people, and unfortunately they've done that. Goes back to Dr. Spock and all this nonsense about worrying about the child's self-esteem. I remember my father used to say, I'll tell you how to get a kid's self-esteem up, and that is tell him to get a job. And boy, is that ever the truth. But they don't want to hear this, these do-gooders, these feel-gooders. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. That's from the Bible too. But heaven forbid we remind that, you know. Just because you're kinder and nicer, so you think, to a group of people or whatever, doesn't mean that you're right. But anyway, so the media has been, of course, making issues. They've made it a racial issue. It is not a racial issue. Now, they've been bragging about and talking about the fact that 204 NFL players knelt during the national anthem and the flag. There are 1,696 NFL players out there on the field, on the sidelines. Now, if 204 knelt, that'd be one thing. But the media makes it into such a hype that now, all of a sudden, especially liberal, non-thinkers, forget that that means 1,492 NFL players didn't kneel. They stood, put their hands over their heart. Now, some would say, well, that's free speech. No, it is not. Never, ever. But this goes back to Vietnam, goes back to this other nonsense that the press and the left has done to demean and diminish our united we stand. Differences of opinion don't ever bother me. Jamming your belief down my throat, you're not going to get away with it. Not when I don't believe it. And yet we've allowed it because the Democratic Party is no longer what the Democratic Party was when I was a very card-carrying member. They have allowed the leadership of the Democratic Party is socialist, plain and simple. They are anti-business, and they show it. And the Republican Party is just gutless. And they have been so used to just having their own way in Washington. The cocktail party set, that's all they care about. The wives in their cocktail dresses and flying all over the world at our expense. But there, no story, no look at the facts in this football situation. And I was saying to Ivana here, my camera gal, I said, you know, it's a tough world out there for a lot of people. And being able to go home, have a few beers with your friends or your girlfriends or our families, getting together and having cookouts and watching in this state the Patriots is a treat. It's something that after a tough week, single mothers, married mothers, mothers that are working full time and bringing up their kids and they love to watch football or they want to watch the Red Sox. To have this media and to have this leftist movement take away what should just be an enjoyment. Stay out of the politics. But a lot of people don't understand that's what the media's about. And one of the things that is not being really properly reported is that attendance, and I'm one of them. I didn't watch the game. I was so upset. Not upset totally with the situation, but with the lack of response from good people. Thomas Jefferson, by the way, Thomas Jefferson, I think the third or fourth president of the United States, one of the most brilliant men ever. But he's being vilified because he owned slaves. How do you like that? How do you like this bunch rewriting history? Does that make you happy? Great men, every one of whom their life was in jeopardy when they took on the English. If they'd have been caught, they'd have been hanged or shot. Nobody cares about that. Thomas Jefferson once said, all tyranny needs to gain a foothold is when good men do nothing. Now my question and my disappointment is not with the football players. It's where is the American Legion? Where are the veterans of foreign wars? Where are the victims that have lost legs and arms? Where are they? The only one, and now he's made him back off, was a Hispanic, by the way, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who evidently inadvertently got outside and spotted by a cameraman. He said now that he didn't intend to break away from his team, and that's because he took a lot of flack. 3 tours of duty he's done in Iran or Iraq. Seen his friends' brains blown up, huh? Sorry to make it so graphic. Sees these young people that he's known, had breakfast with, those veterans of other wars, have breakfast with a young fellow that's your buddy and go out that afternoon and see him killed. If that is not something that requires solidarity and that the flag should be sacrosanct, should be sacred, if you don't like it, tough. This nonsense that everyone should be able to say and do anything. That's not what free speech is all about. And let me tell you, you don't hear people like me on National Public Radio. Why is that? I pay my taxes. It's National Public Radio. They're all liberal commentators. PBS. No conservatives there. Is that fair? But that's the way it is. So there are so many things now that get me perturbed, but I still believe in the country, and I believe in our wonderful form of government. It's just that we're not electing the right people, and it goes back to what I read about when that Scottish professor said, once people, and by the way, The liberal president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, was dead against public employee unions for that reason, because that's who that's referencing. No offense intended, but if it's offensive, tough, because it's the truth. Public employee salaries, by and large today, are too high. I taught school, my wife taught school, we never made a lot of money, but we got health care. We were off every single weekend. Every 5 weeks you had a week off. If it snowed, you rolled over, stayed home. Working mothers, like when I had the restaurants, they'd have to get up, find someone to watch over the kids, because now the kids were off. Same thing now. Teachers going on strike. It's illegal. I taught for 13 years. Every contract I signed said, you are forbidden to strike. And why is that? Why can't we strike? Everybody else. Oh, no. Just like police. They can't strike. Why? Public safety. That's why. What's going to happen to all these kids now? Their mothers and fathers, they got to run around and find someone to keep their kids safe. And these teachers that go on strike say they care about the kids. They can't find a better way. And it's time people took this on, because there is no bottom line in taxpayers. We just get our taxes raised. And I'm talking about you people that teach. You people, this is not me bad-mouthing public employees. I'm talking about a system now where as soon as public employees were unionized and they knew they could get more money from the taxpayer, they voted in those people who would make sure they would see to it that they got higher incomes. So they voted for them. Town meetings, that's why they've fallen apart. There's no such thing as conflict of interest in the liberal establishment or in the Democratic Party now, unless it's the other side. Why should a public employee why should a teacher be able to be the superintendent? And yet you've got people today that think that's perfectly okay. Now, if you resign teaching and you run, that's a different matter. You know, we have police officers becoming selectmen. Are you kidding? Totally against any of the intentions of the political system. And again, you'll hear outrage if ever the other side sees that kind of thing happening. How are we doing for time? Oh, we have that much. Well, then I'll have to keep babbling along here. I have so many other things that I thought I'd mention about realities. Now, you know, let's get back to President John F. Kennedy. And I was very fortunate, as I said, that I became friendly with Ted Kennedy. But I had a tremendous affection, as did all of us that were around in college when John Kennedy was elected. But I was at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst when we went through his election, which was very exciting. The press, of course, loved him. They loved Jackie, and she was very nice, the little bit that I knew her. But she was very nice. And there was no dissension. I mean, there were people who disagreed with him, but none of the nastiness. But that being said, while I was there, along came, right when he was first elected, a Bay of Pigs, it was called, and it was Cuba, where some Cuban nationalists were trying to overthrow Castro, who was a tyrant and an evil person. Cuba, under his leadership, was a third world country. Very poor economically, and anyone that opposed Castro was physically abused or thrown out of the country or murdered. So America and John Kennedy and Eisenhower, Cuba, remember, is only 80 miles from Florida. So they wanted to get rid of Castro. And there was an uprising in the Cuban island of many people who were willing to fight against him. And President Eisenhower, pre-Kennedy, had started looking at everything from assassination of Castro to just a military coup. But they had to be careful because, of course, the Russians were aligned, the communists were aligned with Castro because he was a communist. Well, anyway, to shorten the story, they had what was called the Bay of Pigs, and John Kennedy, in his own words, screwed up, even though a lot of the whole planning had been done prior to him. But he withdrew some air support, things of that nature. And it was a fiasco, and many Cuban nationalists hated John Kennedy forever. And he took the blame. Now, no criticisms. Richard Nixon, it was a very, very shaky election. John Kennedy won by less than 1% of the total vote. Richard Nixon was the vice president at the time. He supported John Kennedy. President Eisenhower supported John Kennedy. Everyone. They didn't take this kind of treatment of division. They kept the country together. John Kennedy then took on Khrushchev and the Russians, who had brought missiles. Now remember, 80 miles from the tip of Florida, the Florida Keys. Very dangerous. The nuclear war. John Kennedy did a good job diplomatically behind the scenes, and also he confronted and had the barricade. I remember all of us in my fraternity up at Amherst shaking in our boots because I had gone through ROTC. We got our commissions, and we said, oh my God, are we going to be off to war? Never mind the fact that everybody was worried about nuclear war. But everyone in the newspapers, television, and the government, both parties, pulled together. And a Holocaust was avoided. Why? Because people took their personal dislike of President Kennedy. And of course, that was when the civil rights movement was going on. It was a horrible time. By the way, just so you get the truth, this was the Democratic Party in the South. It was the Democrats that were the racists. That's conveniently forgotten in the reporting. The Republican Party is the party that supported John Kennedy and the Civil Rights Bill. Although many think, and I'm one, I wonder, if he hadn't been killed, I wonder if it would have been passed. I think there was going to be a very hard fight. It was a very sad and terrible attitude in the South. But you asked our kids today who they think the party was that was responsible. Of course, our kids today, you know, they think Abraham Lincoln was a Democrat, for heaven's sake. That's why I'm so against today's educational bias, because that's where it's gone. So I bring this up because of how they are treating this president. I understand his flaws. All of us do. But I also understand he's a lone beacon out there taking on these corrupt people and taking on an equally corrupt press and an equally corrupt higher education elitist group. And he is being severely criticized over the North Korean situation, yet he's the only one that's standing tall and saying, listen, and behind the scenes, the governments of foreign countries are supportive. Let me tell you. But you can't hear that if the press won't print it. So I hope you're hearing me. This is not me supporting Trump. It's me supporting the United States of America. We're all supposed to love our country. And when you have young people paying $50,000, their parents and them, going into debt to go to colleges, some of whom badmouth the United States of America, and it's tolerated under the guise of free speech, are you kidding? And when you have any American president, I don't care what race, I don't care if it's male, female, when you don't stand behind a president and keep your mouth shut about your criticisms if you know it can hurt all of us, then you're the un-American. And I guess that's back to where I went as far as this football. You know, baseball was my game too, and it's a national pastime. It used to be. But football now is a huge, relaxing, exciting time for people. And when you talk about racism, for heaven's sake, I know there's racism. We have idiots out there. But my word, we have a huge percentage of black players in every sport. And I love it. Why? They're the best. America wants the best playing. That's why I love music and sports anyway. But again, liberals, you know, I have to keep going to it. They drive me crazy. Parents, these bird brains who want to give every kid a trophy. Are you kidding me? That's like every kid getting a paycheck. I swear that's why so many are going back home living with their mother and father at 40 years of age. Oh, I can't make it. For heaven's sake. You can't make it in the United States of America. You don't want to make it. You're too used to having things handed to you. But they also come out now and they come out and say that every kid has to play. Why? Why? Would you do that in an orchestra? If the kid couldn't, hit the right notes, would you say, oh, well, every kid should play in the orchestra? They're crazy, you know. They're absolutely crazy. And the other thing that I will say that will really get people upset is they don't have a sense of humor. So many people are so happy being angry about either themselves or their surroundings, and that's extremely sad. Ted Kennedy once said to me, Donnie, you know, I don't have 5 minutes for whiners and moaners. And whether you liked Ted Kennedy or the Kennedys or not, no one in the world, no one in the written world ever went through as a family what that family went through. Some of it brought on by themselves, but no, the Greek, I was, as I said, an English teacher. You look at Greek tragedies, you look at Roman stories, never was there so much. And young Ted Kennedy, being the youngest, he had to deal with all of those tragedies, all of them. And he always was fun to be around. He laughed a lot. I have no time for anyone that can't, especially look at yourself. Can you laugh? But if you get up in the morning and you look in the mirror and you don't like what you see, that's tough. It's not my fault. And if you're going to expect everybody you run into to kowtow to you or to make you feel better, you're in for a very big disappointment. And I believe, honestly, that that's what we have too many of now. They're told they can be anything. Don't you love it when they say, oh, you can be anything you want to be? What a bunch of nonsense. What a bunch of nonsense. But that's what it's so nice to talk like that. Now, I have no problem with encouraging people to be My high school, I went to Weymouth High School. We're having a reunion coming up. I won't tell you how many years, but our motto was, be the best of whatever you are. Now, people used to laugh and they say, that mean if you're a thief, you're going to be the best thief? Well, maybe it is. But what it really meant was, whatever you're doing, do the best you can. That's more realistic. As a teacher, I can tell you, I saw it happening years ago. I contend 50% of today's college students do not belong there academically, never mind financially. And it's all because of this nonsense that every kid deserves a chance to go to college. That's not so. I played sports. That's like saying every kid deserves to have a tryout with the Red Sox or the Patriots or the Celtics. How much nonsense is that? Well, what's any different with that? As a brain surgeon, should you be able to go in the operating room because you'd like to? All right, I've talked enough. What have we got left here, darling? 5, 10 minutes? 5, okay. Well, anyway, I hope I've given you, if nothing else, maybe a chuckle or two, but I'm not here to be funny. It's very sad. I'm in my 70s. I love this country, and I love the people in it. I've done a lot of things, some good, some bad, like everyone, but I was in the restaurant business. I've employed a lot of people. From all over the world, I've had them. Waiters and bartenders and waitresses from the islands, from Poland, from Russia. People are good. And this country is the greatest place in the world today, and it has always been. It has always been the fundamental strength of the world in the last, certainly, 50 years or more, 100 years. Please remember that, and please, let's take our young people and give them the positive side. Let's talk more about how great we are. We have flaws, of course we do. But we have so many wonderful people. Look what's happened after these storms. Do you know how many people, you get a blurb once in a while about the good things. How many people, I've known them, that are carpenters and plumbers. They're either slow or they just said, no, I'm going to close down, and they've gone down to Florida. They've gone to the islands. They're going to Puerto Rico to do what they can. Are they getting the real coverage of how positive this country is when it comes down to tough times? So I believe the press is the real evil doer in here, not anyone else. So God bless you. I'll try not to leave such a gap in between this show and the next. Thank you, Ivana, for your excellent camera work. And have a good weekend coming up. It's Don McKeag sending you his best wishes. Thanks.